The Book of Genesis, Chapter 1. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Now the earth was a formless void. There was darkness over the deep, with a divine wind sweeping over the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that light was good, and God divided light from darkness. God called light day, and darkness he called night. Evening came and morning came the first day. God said, "Let there be a vault through the middle of the waters, to divide the waters in two." And so it was. God made a vault, and it divided the waters under the vault from the waters above the vault. God called the vault heaven. Evening came and morning came the second day. God said, "Let the waters under heaven come together into a single mass, and let dry land appear." And so it was. God called the dry land earth, and the mass of waters seas. And God saw that it was good. God said, "Let the earth produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and fruit trees on earth, bearing fruit with their seed inside, each corresponding to its own species." And so it was. The earth produced vegetation, the various kinds of seed-bearing plants, and the fruit trees with seed inside, each corresponding to its own species. God saw that it was good. Evening came and morning came the third day. God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of heaven to divide day from night, and let them indicate festivals, days, and years. Let them be lights in the vault of heaven to shine on the earth." And so it was. God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the smaller light to govern the night, and the stars. God set them in the vault of heaven to shine on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to divide light from darkness. God saw that it was good. Evening came and morning came the fourth day. God said, "Let the waters be alive with a swarm of living creatures, and let birds wing their way above the earth across the vault of heaven." And so it was. God created great sea monsters, and all the creatures that glide and teem in the waters in their own species, and winged birds in their own species. God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the waters of the seas, and let the birds multiply on the land." Evening came and morning came the fifth day. God said, "Let the earth produce every kind of living creatures in its own species, cattle, creeping things, and wild animals of all kinds." And so it was. God made wild animals in their own species, and cattle in theirs, and every creature that crawls along the earth in its own species. God saw that it was good. God said, "Let us make man in our own image, in the likeness of ourselves, and let them be masters of the fish of the sea, the birds of heaven, the cattle, all the wild animals, and all the creatures that creep along the ground." God created man in the image of himself. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, saying to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Be masters of the fish of the sea, the birds of heaven, and all the living creatures that move on earth." God also said, "Look, to you I give all the seed-bearing plants everywhere on the surface of the earth, and all the trees with seed-bearing fruit. This will all be your food. And to all the wild animals, all the birds of heaven, and all the living creatures that creep along the ground. I give all the foliage of the plants as their food. And so it was. God saw all he had made, and indeed it was very good. Evening came and morning came, the sixth day. Genesis chapter 2. Thus heaven and earth were completed with all. On the seventh day, God had completed the work he had been doing. He rested on the seventh day after all the work he had been doing. God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on that day he rested after all his work of creating. Such was the story of heaven and earth as they were created. At the time when Yahweh God made earth and heaven, there was as yet no wild bush on the earth, nor had any wild plant yet sprung up. For Yahweh God had not sent rain on the earth, nor was there any man to till the soil. Instead, water flowed out on the ground and watered all the surface of the soil. Yahweh God shaped man from the soil on the ground and blew the breath of life into his nostrils, and man became a living being. Yahweh God planted a garden in Eden, which is in the east, and there he put the man he had fashioned. From the soil, Yahweh God caused to grow every kind of tree, enticing to look at and good to eat, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river flowed from Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided to make four streams. The first is named the Pishon, and this winds all through the land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of this country is pure. Bdellium and cornelian stone are found there. The second river is named the Gihon, and this winds all through the land of Cush. The third river is named the Tigris, and this flows to the east of Ashur. The fourth river is the Euphrates. Yahweh God took the man and settled him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and take care of it. Then Yahweh God gave the man this command: "You are free to eat of all the trees in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you are not to eat. For the day you eat of that, you are doomed to die." Yahweh God said, "It is not right that the man should be alone. I shall make him a helper." So from the soil, Yahweh God fashioned all the wild animals and all the birds of the heaven. This he brought to the man to see what he would call them. Each one was to bear the name the man would give it. The man gave names to all the cattle, all the birds of heaven, and all the wild animals. But no helper suitable for the man was found for him. Then Yahweh God made the man fall into a deep sleep, and while he was asleep, he took one of his ribs and closed the flesh up again forthwith. Yahweh God fashioned the rib he had taken from the man into a woman, and brought her to the man. And the man said, "This one at last is bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She is to be called woman, because she was taken from man. This is why a man leaves his father and mother, and becomes attached to his wife, and they become one flesh." Now both of them were naked, the man and his wife, but they felt no shame before each other. Genesis chapter 3. Now the snake was the most subtle of all the animals that Yahweh God had made. It asked the woman, "Did God really say you were not to eat from any of the trees in the garden?" The woman answered the snake, "We may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden, but of the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden God said, 'You must not eat it, nor touch it, under pain of death. Then the snake said to the woman, "No, you will not die. God knows in fact that the day you eat it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like gods, knowing good from evil." The woman saw that the tree was good to eat and pleasing to the eye, and that it was enticing for the wisdom that it would give. So she took some of its fruit and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together to make themselves loincloths. The man and his wife heard the sound of Yahweh God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from Yahweh God among the trees of the garden. But Yahweh God called to the man, "Where are you?" he asked. "I heard the sound of you in the garden," he replied. "I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." "Who told you that you were naked?" he asked. "Have you been eating from the tree I forbade you to eat?" The man replied, "It was the woman you put with me. She gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then Yahweh God said to the woman, "Why did you do that?" The woman replied, "The snake tempted me, and I ate it." Then Yahweh God said to the snake, "Because you have done this, accursed be you of all the animals, wild and tame. On your belly you will go, and on dust you will feed as long as you live. I shall put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. It will bruise your head, and you will strike its heel." To the woman he said, "I shall give you intense pain in childbearing. You will give birth to your children in pain. Your yearning will be for your husband, and he will dominate you." To the man he said, "Because you listened to the voice of your wife and ate from the tree of which I had forbidden you to eat, accursed be the soil because of you. Painfully will you get your food from it as long as you live. It will yield you brambles and thistles as you eat the produce of the land. By the sweat of your face will you earn your food, until you return to the ground as you were taken from it. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return." The man named his wife Eve, because she was the mother of all those who live. Yahweh God made tunics of skins for the man and his wife and clothed them. Then Yahweh God said, "Now that the man has become like one of us in knowing good from evil, he must not be allowed to reach out his hand and pick from the tree of life too, and eat and live forever." So Yahweh God expelled him from the Garden of Eden to till the soil from which he had been taken. He banished the man, and in front of the Garden of Eden he posted the great winged creatures and a fiery flashing sword to guard the way to the tree of life. Genesis chapter 4. The man had intercourse with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. "I have acquired a man with the help of Yahweh," she said. She gave birth to a second child, Abel, the brother of Cain. Now Abel became a shepherd and kept flocks, while Cain tilled the soil. Time passed, and Cain brought some of the produce of the soil as an offering for Yahweh, while Abel, for his part, brought the firstborn of his flock and some of their fat as well. Yahweh looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but he did not look with favor on Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry and downcast. Yahweh asked Cain, "Why are you angry and downcast? If you are doing right, surely you ought to hold your head high. But if you are not doing right, sin is crouching at the door and hungry to get you. You can still master him." Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let us go out." And while they were in the open country, Cain set on his brother Abel and killed him. Yahweh asked Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I do not know," he replied. "Am I my brother's guardian?" "What have you done?" Yahweh asked. "Listen, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. Now be cursed and banned from the ground that has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood at your hands. When you till the ground, it will no longer yield up its strength to you. A restless wanderer you will be on the earth." Cain then said to Yahweh, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Look, today you drive me from the surface of the earth. I must hide from you and be a restless wanderer on the earth. Why? Whoever comes across me will kill me." "Very well then," Yahweh replied. "Whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance." So Yahweh put a mark on Cain, so that no one coming across him would kill him. Cain left Yahweh's presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain had intercourse with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. He became the founder of a city and gave the city the name of his son Enoch. Enoch fathered Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. Lamech married two women. The name of the first was Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. Ada gave birth to Habal. He was the ancestor of tent-dwelling herdsmen. His brother's name was Hubal. He was the ancestor of all who play the harp and the pipe. As for Zillah, she gave birth to Tubal-Cain. He was the ancestor of all who work copper and iron. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, "Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. Wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I killed a man for wounding me, a boy for striking me. Sevenfold vengeance for Cain, but 77-fold for Lamech." Adam had intercourse with his wife, and she gave birth to a son, whom she named Seth. "Because God has granted me other offspring," she said, "in place of Abel, since Cain has killed him." A son was also born to Seth, and he named him Enosh. This man was the first to invoke the name Yahweh. Genesis chapter 5. This is the roll of Adam's descendants. On the day that God created Adam, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them. He blessed them and gave them the name man when they were created. When Adam was 130 years old, he fathered a son in his likeness, after his image, and he called him Seth. Adam lived for 800 years after the birth of Seth, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Adam lived for 930 years, then he died. When Seth was 105 years old, he fathered Enosh. After the birth of Enosh, Seth lived for 807 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Seth lived for 912 years, then he died. When Enosh was 90 years old, he fathered Kenan. After the birth of Kenan, Enosh lived for 815 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Enosh lived for 905 years, then he died. When Kenan was 70 years old, he fathered Mahalalel. After the birth of Mahalalel, Kenan lived for 840 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Kenan lived for 910 years, then he died. When Mahalalel was 65 years old, he fathered Jared. After the birth of Jared, Mahalalel lived for 830 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Mahalalel lived for 895 years, then he died. When Jared was 162 years old, he fathered Enoch. After the birth of Enoch, Jared lived for 800 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Jared lived for 962 years, then he died. When Enoch was 65 years old, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God. After the birth of Methuselah, Enoch lived for 300 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Enoch lived for 365 years. Enoch walked with God, then was no more, because God took him. When Methuselah was 187 years old, he fathered Lamech. After the birth of Lamech, Methuselah lived for 782 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. In all, Methuselah lived for 969 years, then he died. When Lamech was 182 years old, he fathered a son. He gave him the name Noah, because he said, "Here is one who will give us, in the midst of our toil and the laboring of our hands, a consolation out of the very soil that Yahweh cursed." After the birth of Noah, Lamech lived for 595 years and fathered sons and daughters. In all, Lamech lived for 777 years, then he died. When Noah was 500 years old, he fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis chapter 6. When people began being numerous on earth, and daughters had been born to them, the sons of God, looking at the women, saw how beautiful they were, and married as many of them as they chose. Yahweh said, "My spirit cannot be indefinitely responsible for human beings, who are only flesh. Let the time allowed each be 120 years." The Nephilim were on earth in those days, and even afterwards, when the sons of God resorted to the women and had children by them. These were the heroes of days gone by, men of renown. Yahweh saw that human wickedness was great on earth, and that human hearts contrived nothing but wicked schemes all day long. Yahweh regretted having made human beings on earth, and was grieved at heart. And Yahweh said, "I shall rid the surface of the earth of the human beings whom I created, human and animal, the creeping things and the birds of heaven, for I regret having made them." But Noah won Yahweh's favor. This is the story of Noah. Noah was a good man and a bright man among his contemporaries, and he walked with God. Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. God saw that the earth was corrupt and full of lawlessness. God looked at the earth. It was corrupt, for corrupt were the ways of all living things on earth. God said to Noah, "I have decided that the end has come for all living things, for the earth is full of lawlessness because of human beings. So I am now about to destroy them and the earth. Make yourself an ark out of resinous wood. Make it of reeds and cork it with pitch inside and out. This is how to make it. The length of the ark is to be 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make a roof to the ark, building it up to a cubit higher. Put the entrance in the side of the ark, which is to be made with lower, second, and third decks. For my part, I am going to send the flood, the waters on earth, to destroy all living things, having the breath of life under heaven. Everything on earth is to perish. But with you I shall establish my covenant, and you will go aboard the ark, yourself, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives along with you. From all living creatures, from all living things, you must take 2 of each kind aboard the ark, to save their lives with yours. They must be a male and a female, of every species of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that creeps along the ground. 2 must go with you, so that their lives may be saved. For your part, provide yourself with eatables of all kinds, and lay in a store of them, to serve as food for yourself and them. Noah did this exactly as God commanded him. He did. Genesis chapter 7. Yahweh said to Noah, "Go aboard the ark, you and all your household, for you alone of your contemporaries do I see before me as an upright man. Of every clean animal you must take 7 pairs, a male and its female. Of the unclean animals you must take 1 pair, a male and its female. And of the birds of heaven 7 pairs, a male and its female, to preserve their species throughout the earth. For in 7 days' time I shall make it rain on earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I shall wipe every creature I have made off the face of the earth." Noah did exactly as Yahweh commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood came, the waters over the earth. Noah with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives boarded the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Of the clean animals and the animals that are not clean, of the birds and all that creeps along the ground, 1 pair boarded the ark with Noah, 1 male and 1 female, as God had commanded Noah. 7 days later the waters of the flood appeared on earth. And in 600 year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, and on the 17th day of the month, that very day, all the springs of the great deep burst through, and the sluices of heaven opened, and heavy rain fell on earth for 40 days and 40 nights. That very day Noah and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth boarded the ark, with Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons, and with them every species of wild animal, every species of cattle, every species of creeping things that creep along the ground, every species of bird, everything that flies, everything with wings. 1 pair of all that was alive and had the breath of life boarded the ark with Noah. And those that went aboard were a male and female, of all that was alive, as God has commanded him. Then Yahweh shut him in. The flood lasted 40 days on earth. The waters swelled, lifting the ark until it floated off the ground. The waters rose, swelling higher above the ground, and the ark drifted away over the waters. The waters rose higher and higher above the ground, until all the highest mountains under the whole of heaven were submerged. The waters reached their peak 15 cubits above the submerged mountains, and all living things that steered on earth perished, birds, cattle, wild animals, all the creatures swarming over the earth, and all human beings. Everything with the least breath of life in its nostrils, everything on dry land died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out, people, animals, creeping things, and birds. They were wiped out of the earth, and only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. The waters maintained their level on earth for 150 days. Genesis chapter 8. But God had Noah in mind, and all the wild animals, and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. God sent a wind across the earth, and the waters began to subside. The springs of the deep and the sluices of heaven were stopped up, and the heavy rain from heaven was held back. Little by little the waters ebbed from the earth. After 150 days the waters fell, and in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The waters gradually fell until the 10th month, when on the first day of the 10th month the mountain tops appeared. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the ark and released a raven, which flew back and forth as it waited for the waters to dry up on earth. He then released a dove to see whether the waters were receding from the surface of the earth. But the dove, finding nowhere to perch, returned to him in the ark, for there was water over the whole surface of the earth. Putting out his hand, he took hold of it and brought it back into the ark with him. After waiting 7 more days, he again released the dove from the ark. In the evening, the dove came back to him, and there in its beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. So Noah realized that the waters were receding from the earth. After waiting 7 more days, he released the dove, and now it returned to him no more. It was in the 601st year of Noah's life, in the first month, and on the first of the month, that the waters began drying out on earth. Noah lifted back the hatch of the ark and looked out. The surface of the ground was dry. In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out all the animals with you, all living things, the birds, the cattle, and all the creeping things that creep along the ground, for them to swarm on earth, for them to breed and multiply on earth." So Noah came out with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives, and all the wild animals, all the cattle, all the birds, and all the creeping things that creep along the ground came out of the ark, one species after another. Then Noah built an altar to Yahweh, and choosing from all the clean animals and all the clean birds, he presented burnt offerings on the altar. Yahweh smelt the pleasing smell and said to himself, "Never again will I curse the earth because of human beings, because their heart contrives evil from their infancy. Never again will I strike down every living thing as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." Genesis chapter 9. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Breed, multiply, and fill the earth. Be the terror and the dread of all the animals on land, and all the birds of heaven, of everything that moves on land, and all the fish of the sea. They are placed in your hands. Every living thing that moves will be yours to eat. No less than the foliage of the plants, I give you everything, with this exception. You must not eat flesh with life, that is to say, blood in it. And I shall demand account of your life blood too. I shall demand it of every animal and of man as regards his fellow man. I shall demand account for human life. He who sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God was man created. Be fruitful then and multiply, teem over the earth and subdue it." God spoke as follows to Noah and his sons. "I am now establishing my covenant with you, and with your descendants to come, and with every living creature that was with you, birds, cattle, and every wild animal with you, everything that came out of the ark, every living thing on earth. And I shall maintain my covenant with you, that never again shall all living things be destroyed by the waters of a flood, nor shall there ever again be a flood to devastate the earth. And this, God said, is the sign of the covenant which I now make between myself and you, and every living creature with you for all ages to come. I now set my bow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I gather the clouds over the earth, and the bow appears in the clouds, I shall recall the covenant between myself and you, and every living creature, in a word, all living things, and never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all living things. When the bow is in the clouds, I shall see it, and call to mind the eternal covenant between God and every living creature on earth, that is, all living things. That, God told Noah, is the sign of the covenant I have established between myself and all living things on earth. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham, being the father of Canaan. These three were Noah's sons, and from this the whole earth was peopled. Noah, a tiller of the soil, was first to plant the vine. He drank some of the wine, and while he was drunk, he lay uncovered in his tent. Ham, father of Canaan, saw his father naked, and told his two brothers outside. Shem and Japheth took a cloak, and they both put it over their shoulders, and walking backwards covered their father's nakedness. They kept their faces turned away, and they did not look at their father naked. When Noah awoke from his stupor, he learned what his youngest son had done to him, and said, "Accursed be Canaan, he shall be his brother's meanest slave." He added, "Blessed be Yahweh, God of Shem, let Canaan be his slave." May God make space for Japheth, may he live in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. In all, Noah's life lasted 950 years, then he died. Genesis chapter 10. These are the descendants of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, to whom sons were born after the flood. Japheth's son, Gomer, Magog, the Medes, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, Tiras. Gomer's son, Ashkenaz, Riphat, Togarma. Javan's sons, Tarshish, the Kittim, the Dananites. From this came the dispersal of the islands of the nations. These were Japheth's sons, in their respective countries, each with his own language by clan and nation. Ham's son, Cush, Mizraim, Put, Canaan. Cush's sons, Zebah, Havila, Sabta, Raama, Sabteka. Raama's son, Sheba, Dedan. Cush fathered Nimrod, who was the first potentate on the earth. He was a mighty hunter in the eyes of Yahweh, hence the saying, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter in the eyes of Yahweh. The mainstays of his empire were Babel, Erech, and Akkad, all of them in the land of Shinar. From this country came Ashur, and he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Kala, and Resin between Nineveh and Kala. Mizraim fathered the people of Lud, of Anam, Lehab, Naphtu, Patrus, Kashlu, and Kaftor, from which the Philistines came. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, then Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Avadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. Later, the Canaanite clans spread out. The Canaanite frontier stretched from Sidon all the way to Gerar near Gaza, and all the way to Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim near Lesha. These were Ham's sons, by clans and languages, by countries and nations. Shem too fathered sons, being ancestor of all the sons of Eber, and Japheth's elder brother. Shem's sons, Elam, Ashur, Arpachshad, Lud, Aram. Aram's sons, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. To Eber were born two sons. The first was called Peleg, because it was in his time that the earth was divided, and his brother was called Joktan. Joktan fathered Almodad, Shelef, Hasarmavet, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havila, Jobab. All these were sons of Joktan. They occupied a stretch of country from Mesha all the way to Sephar, the eastern mountain range. These were Shem's sons, by clans and languages, by countries and nations. Such were the clans of Noah's descendants, listed by descent and nation. From them other nations branched out on the earth after the flood. Genesis chapter 11. The whole world spoke the same language, with the same vocabulary. Now as people moved eastwards, they found a valley in the land of Shinar where they settled. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them in the fire." For stone they used bricks, and for mortar they used bitumen. "Come," they said, "let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top reaching heaven. Let us make a name for ourselves, so that we do not get scattered all over the world." Now Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower that the people had built. "So they are all a single people with a single language," said Yahweh. "This is only the start of their undertakings. Now nothing they plan to do will be beyond them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they cannot understand one another." Yahweh scattered them thence all over the world, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, since there Yahweh confused the language of the world, and from there Yahweh scattered them all over the world. These are Shem's descendants. When Shem was 100 years old, he fathered Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. After the birth of Arpachshad, Shem lived 500 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Arpachshad was 35 years old, he fathered Shelah. After the birth of Shelah, Arpachshad lived 403 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Shelah was 30 years old, he fathered Eber. After the birth of Eber, Shelah lived 403 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Eber was 34 years old, he fathered Peleg. After the birth of Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Peleg was 30 years old, he fathered Reu. After the birth of Reu, Peleg lived 209 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Reu was 32 years old, he fathered Serug. After the birth of Serug, Reu lived 207 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Serug was 30 years old, he fathered Nahor. After the birth of Nahor, Serug lived 200 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Nahor was 29 years old, he fathered Terah. After the birth of Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and fathered sons and daughters. When Terah was 70 years old, he fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. These are Terah's descendants. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in his native land Ur of the Chaldeans. Abram and Nahor both married. Abram's wife was called Sarai. Nahor's wife was called Milcah, daughter of Haran, father of Milcah and Iscah. Sarai was barren, having no child. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law, the wife of Abram, and made them leave Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But on arrival in Haran, they settled there. Terah's life lasted 205 years. Then he died at Haran. Genesis chapter 12. Yahweh said to Abram, "Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house, for a country which I shall show you, and I shall make you a great nation. I shall bless you and make your name famous. You are to be a blessing. I shall bless those who bless you, and shall curse those who curse you, and all clans on earth will bless themselves by you." So Abram went as Yahweh told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had amassed, and the people they had acquired in Haran. They set off for the land of Canaan and arrived there. Abram passed through the country as far as the holy place at Shechem, the oak of Moreh. The Canaanites were in the country at the time. Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, I shall give this country to your progeny. And there Abram built an altar to Yahweh who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the mountainous district east of Bethel, where he pitched his tent, with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. There he built an altar to Yahweh and invoked the name of Yahweh. Then Abram made his way stage by stage to the Negev. There was a famine in the country, and Abram went down to Egypt to stay there for a time, since the famine in the country was severe. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "Look, I know you are a beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'That is his wife,' and they will kill me but leave you alive. Therefore, please tell them you are my sister, so that they may treat me well because of you, and spare my life out of regard for you." When Abram arrived in Egypt, the Egyptians did indeed see that the woman was very beautiful. When Pharaoh's officials saw her, they sang her praises to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's household. And Abram was very well treated because of her, and received flocks, oxen, donkeys, men and women slaves, she-donkeys, and camels. But Yahweh inflicted severe plagues on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister,' so that I took her to be my wife? Now, here is your wife, take her and go." And Pharaoh gave his people orders about him. They sent him on his way with his wife and all his possessions. Genesis chapter 13. From Egypt, Abram returned to the Negev with his wife and all he possessed, and Lot with him. Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. By stages he went from the Negev to Bethel, where he had first pitched his tent between Bethel and Ai, at a place where he had formerly erected the altar. There Abram invoked the name of Yahweh. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, had flocks and cattle of his own, and tents too. The land was not sufficient to accommodate them both at once, for they had too many possessions to be able to live together. Dispute broke out between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and those of Lot. Accordingly, Abram said to Lot, "We do not want discord between us or between my herdsmen and yours, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land open before you? Go in the opposite direction to me. If you take the left, I shall go right. If you take the right, I shall go left." Looking around, Lot saw all the Jordan plain irrigated everywhere. This was before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of Yahweh, or the land of Egypt, as far as Zoar. So Lot chose all the Jordan plain for himself and moved off eastwards. Thus they parted company. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, Lot settled among the cities of the plain, pitching his tents on the outskirts of Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were vicious and great sinners against Yahweh. Yahweh said to Abram after Lot had parted company from him, "Look all around from where you are, to north and south, to east and west. For all the land within sight I shall give to you and your descendants forever. I shall make your descendants like the dust on the ground. When people succeed in counting the specks of dust on the ground, then they will be able to count your descendants too. On your feet, travel the length and breadth of the country, for I mean to give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and went to settle at the oak of Mamre at Hebron, and there he built an altar to Yahweh. Genesis chapter 14. When Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elazar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, made war on Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All the latter joined forces in the valley of Siddim. For 12 years they had been under the yoke of Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they revolted. In the 14th year Chedorlaomer arrived, and the kings who had allied themselves with him. They defeated the Rephaim and Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim at Ham, the Emim in the plain of Kiriathaim, the Horites in the mountainous district of Seir, near El Paran, which is on the edge of the desert. Wheeling around, they came to the spring of judgment, that is Kadesh. They conquered all the territory of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who lived in Hazazon Tamar. Then the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela marched out and engaged them in the valley of Siddim. Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of the Goim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now there were many bitumen wells in the valley of Siddim, and in their flight the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fell into them, while the rest fled into the hills. The conquerors seized all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their provisions, and made off. They also took Lot, the nephew of Abram, and his possessions, and made off. He had been living at Sodom. A survivor came to tell Abram and Aner the Hebrew, who was living at the oak of the Amorite Mamre, the brother of Eshcol. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he mustered his retainers born in his own household, numbering 318, and gave chase as far as Dan. He and his retainers deployed against them under cover of dark, defeated them, and pursued them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. He recaptured all the goods as well as his kinsman Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the people. When Abram returned from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings who had made on his side, the king of Sodom came to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is, the valley of the king. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He pronounced this blessing: Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High for putting your enemies into your clutches. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people and take the possessions for yourself. But Abram replied to the king of Sodom, I swear by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, not one thread, not one sandal strap will I take of what is yours, for you to be able to say, I made Abram rich. For myself, nothing except what the troops have used up, and the share due to the men who came with me. Eshcol, Aner, and Mamre, let them take their share. Genesis chapter 15. Sometime later, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, and shall give you a very great reward. Lord Yahweh, Abram replied, What use are your gifts, as I am going on my way childless? Since you have given me no offspring, Abram continued, a member of my household will be my heir. Then Yahweh's words came to him in reply, Such a one will not be your heir. No, your heir will be the issue of your own body. Then taking him outside, he said, Look up at the sky and count the stars if you can. Just so will your descendants be, he told him. Abram put his faith in Yahweh, and this was reckoned to him as uprightness. He then said to him, I am Yahweh who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this country as your possession. Lord Yahweh, Abram replied, How can I know that I shall possess it? He said to him, Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old she-goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. He brought him all this, split the animals down the middle, and placed each half opposite the other, but the birds he did not divide. And whenever birds of prey swooped down on the carcasses, Abram drove them off. Now as the sun was on the point of setting, a trance fell on Abram, and a deep dark dread descended on him. Then Yahweh said to Abram, "Know this for certain, that your descendants will be exiles in a land not their own, and be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. But I shall bring judgment on the nation that enslaves them, and after this they will live, with many possessions. For your part, you will join your ancestors in peace. You will be buried at a happy old age. In the 4th generation they will come back here, for until then the iniquity of the Amorites will not have reached its full extent." When the sun had set and it was dark, there appeared a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passing between the animals' pieces. That day Yahweh made a covenant with Abram in these terms: "To your descendants I give this country, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." Genesis chapter 16. Abram's wife Sarai had borne him no child, but she had an Egyptian slave girl called Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "Listen now, since Yahweh has kept me from having children, go to my slave girl. Perhaps I shall get children through her." And Abram took Sarai's advice. Thus, after Abram had lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years, Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian slave girl, and gave her to Abram as his wife. He went to Hagar, and she conceived. And when she knew she had conceived, her mistress counted for nothing in her eyes. Then Sarai said to Abram, "This outrage done to me is your fault. It was I who put my slave girl into your arms, but now she knows that she has conceived. I count for nothing in her eyes. Yahweh judge between me and you." "Very well," Abram said to Sarai, "your slave girl is at your disposal. Treat her as you think fit." Sarai accordingly treated her so badly that she ran away from her. The angel of Yahweh found her by a spring in the desert, the spring on the road to Shur. He said, "Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I am running away from my mistress Sarai," she replied. The angel of Yahweh said to her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel of Yahweh further said to her, "I shall make your descendants too numerous to be counted." Then the angel of Yahweh said to her, "Now you have conceived and will bear a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, for Yahweh has heard your cries of distress. A wild donkey of a man he will be, his hand against every man, and every man's hand against him, living his life in defiance of all his kinsmen." Hagar gave a name to Yahweh who had spoken to her. "You are El Roi," by which he meant, "Did I not go on seeing here after him who sees me?" This is why the well is called the well of Lahai-Roi. It is between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave his son, born by Hagar, the name Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Genesis chapter 17. When Abraham was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to him and said, "I am El Shaddai. Live in my presence, be perfect, and I shall grant a covenant between myself and you, and make you very numerous." And Abram bowed to the ground. God spoke to him as follows, "For my part, this is my covenant with you. You will become the father of many nations, and you are no longer to be called Abram. Your name is to be Abraham, for I am making you father of many nations. I shall make you exceedingly fertile. I shall make you into nations, and your issue will be kings. And I shall maintain my covenant between myself and you, and your descendants after you, generation after generation, as a covenant in perpetuity, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. And to you and to your descendants after you, I shall give the country where you are now immigrants, the entire land of Canaan, to own in perpetuity, and I shall be their God. God further said to Abraham, You for your part must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, generation after generation. This is my covenant which you must keep between myself and you, and your descendants after you. Every one of your males must be circumcised. You must circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that will be the sign of the covenant between myself and you. As soon as he is 8 days old, every one of your males, generation after generation, must be circumcised, including slaves born within the household or brought from a foreigner not of your descent. Whether born within the household or bought, they must be circumcised. My covenant must be marked in your flesh as a covenant in perpetuity. The uncircumcised male whose foreskin has not been circumcised, that person must be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Furthermore, God said to Abraham, As regards your wife Sarai, you must not call her Sarai, but Sarah. I shall bless her, and moreover give you a son by her. I shall bless her, and she will become nations. Kings of peoples will issue from her. Abraham bowed to the ground, and he laughed, thinking to himself, Is a child to be born to a man 100 years old, and will Sarah have a child at the age of 90? Abraham said to God, May Ishmael live in your presence, that will be enough. But God replied, Yes, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, whom you must name Isaac. And I shall maintain my covenant with him, a covenant in perpetuity, to be his God and the God of his descendants after him. For Ishmael too I grant you your request. I hereby bless him and will make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He will be the father of 12 princes, and I shall make him into a great nation. But my covenant I shall maintain with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear at this time next year. When he had finished speaking to Abraham, God went up from him. Then Abraham took his son Ishmael, all the slaves born in his household or whom he had bought, in short all the males among the people of Abraham's household, and circumcised their foreskin that same day as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when his foreskin was circumcised. Ishmael his son was 13 years old when his foreskin was circumcised. Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised on the very same day, and all the men of his household, those born in the household, and those bought from foreigners, were circumcised with him.